Welcome to this chapter by chapter reading of the Montessori Method by Dr. Maria Montessori. When I was starting my Montessori school, I turned directly to Dr. Montessori's original writings, partly out of conviction and partly because they were available in the public domain and free. What I didn't realize at the time was I was reading the original English translation commissioned while Dr. Montessori was still alive, translated in 1912 by Anne E. George. Later, I discovered that many of us have encountered Montessori through later translations, especially the 1967 version, which helped spread the method widely in the US, and for which I'm personally grateful. But returning to the original text, I found something more: Dr. Montessori's full voice, her depth, her vision, and her spiritual and philosophical foundations. In this podcast, I'm reading the original translation chapter by chapter, adding reflections to help connect her words to today's classrooms and families. This is an experiment, an adventure, and a shared journey of learning. Let's begin. Well, welcome to chapter 11 of reading the Montessori Method together, chapter by chapter. I wasn't going to do this one today, but it's so teeny tiny that I was like, what the heck? But then I started writing all my talking points on this chapter, and I clearly have a lot to say, and I'm very excited about it. So this chapter is titled Manual Labor, the Potter's Art and Building. And what this chapter is about is really the importance of hands doing work. And so real quick, right from the onset, she talks about Friedrich Fröbel. And I've mentioned him before I haven't, she did, in several of the chapters prior, and I never really took any time to talk about who this person is, who clearly really inspired her to a great deal. He's a German educator and the founder of the kindergarten, right? He believed children learn best through purposeful activity, play, and interaction with materials. Fröbel developed gifts and occupations, structured materials like blocks, clay, paper folding, and weaving to support order, geometry, creativity, and moral development. Dr. Montessori respected Fröbel's insight that hands educate the mind, but diverged by replacing symbolic play with real work and emphasizing function and usefulness, not abstraction alone. This chapter can be read as Montessori's building upon Fröbel's foundation, grounding it more firmly in reality and social contribution. The other thing that I do want to talk about real quickly is she mentions plastic a lot, and she is referring to plasticity, meaning moldable or capable of being shaped. And I think that's important. And I kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole on this one because I knew a little bit about the history of plastic, and it was enough to be dangerous, but I wasn't sure if I was 100% accurate. So I kind of went down a little bit rabbit hole on this. So plastic, as we know it, was invented in 1862 in London. Then in 1907, it was invented in the US as the first fully synthetic plastic called Bakelite. So Dr. Montessori's original work predates the widespread synthetic plastics. And then I went a little bit further, and it was DuPont in Delaware who created the plastics and the widespread plastics as we know in the 1930s. So it would definitely have been in her lifetime. So I I kind of went a little rabbit hole there, and so that's where we are. But there's a lot of really great modern studies on the handwork and brain development that you can look into, and I have these resources if you're so interested and inclined. So modern neuroscience strongly supports Dr. Montessori's insights. Fine motor work strengthens neutral pathways between the motor cortex and the sensory cortex, executive function centers. The repetitive, purposeful hand movements improve concentration, memory, problem solving, and emotional regulation. Bilateral hand use, both hands working together, supports language development and mathematical reasoning. And the clay work and building are now linked to increased spatial intelligence, stronger pre-writing skills, and improved planning and sequencing abilities. So all of Dr. Montessori's work and all of her conclusions that she came to in her Montessori method, all of this is long before MRI even existed. And so it's very interesting to see all of this new modern science really validating her work. Why children love handwork, especially when it's useful, is because it deeply, it serves a real purpose, is used by others, it improves their environment. It's not just entertainment, but it's really a part of dignity, and it develops, and there's a lot of really great case study on this. It develops respect for their surroundings. They care for material and spaces, and they see themselves as capable members of the community. In this chapter, she's going to go into brick making and mini ovens. I don't think that's practical nowadays, but there are probably really great ways to do it nowadays to create things that could be used in the environment. And then they would have that relationship with the things that they made in their environment and being useful to their community and environment. So maybe woodworking would be a great idea. I don't know. Like obviously gardening for sure. Sewing would be interesting, or weaving rugs, sewing napkins, mending classroom linens and cloths. Those might be really neat things. I'd be interested to hear what other people are thinking as far as ways that they can have useful work that could be used in the environment, creating useful things for the environment. Okay, so dedicating an entire chapter indicates that this is not enrichment. It is core to the pedagogy, and now we can see the importance of this with MRI work. And manual labor is intellectual, it's moral, it's social, it's developmental. So that is really what makes this exciting, this very tiny chapter with a lot of thoughts. Okay, so with that, I will go ahead and get started on chapter 11, manual labor, the potter's art and building. Manual labor is distinguished from manual gymnastics by the fact that the object of the latter is to exercise the hand and the former to accomplish a determinate work, being or stimulating a socially useful object. The one perfects the individual and the other enriches the world. The two things are, however, connected because in general, only one who has perfected his own hand can produce useful product. I have thought wise about a short trial to exclude completely Fröbel's exercises, because weaving and sewing on cardboard are ill adapted to the psychological state of the child's visual organs, where the powers of the accommodation of the eye have not yet reached complete development. Hence, these exercises cause an effort for the organ which may have a fatal influence on the development of the sight. The other little exercises of Fröbel, such as the folding of paper, are exercises of the hand, not work. There is still left plastic work, the most rational among all the exercises of Fröbel, which consist in making the child reproduce determinate objects in clay. In consideration, however, of the system of liberty which I propose, I did not like to make the children copy anything, and in giving them clay to fashion in their own manner, I did not direct the children to produce useful things, nor was I accomplishing an educative result inasmuch as plastic work, as I shall show later, serves for the study of the psychic individuality of the child in his spontaneous manifestations, but not for his education. I decided, therefore, to try in the children's house some very interesting exercises which I had seen accomplished by an artist, Professor Randon, in the School of Educative Art founded by him. This school had its origin along the Society for Young People called Giovenesse Gentil, both school and society having the object of educating youth in gentleness towards their surroundings. That is, in respect for objects, buildings, monuments, a real important part of civil education, and one of which interested me, particularly on account of the children's house, since that institution has as its fundamental aim to teach precisely this respect for the walls, for the house, and for the surroundings. Very suitably, Professor Randon had decided that the Society of Giovenesse Gentil could not be based upon sterile theoretical preachings of the principles of citizenship or upon moral pledges taken by the children, but that it must proceed from an artistic education which should lead the youth to appreciate and love and consequently respect objects and especially monuments and historic buildings. Thus, the School of Educative Art was inspired by a broad artistic conception, including the reproduction of objects which are commonly met in the surroundings. The history and the prehistory of their production and the illustration of the principal civil monuments, which in Rome are in large measure composed of archaeological monuments, in order the more directly to accomplish his object. Professor Randon founded his admirable school in an opening in one of the most artistic parts of the wall of Rome, namely the wall of Belisarius, overlooking the Villa Umberto I, a wall which has been entirely neglected by the authorities and by no means respected by the citizens, and upon which Randon lavished care, decorating it with graceful hanging gardens on the outside and locating within it the School of Art, which was shaped by Giovenesse Gentile. Here, Randon has tried very fittingly to rebuild and revive a form of art which was once the glory of Italy and of Florence, but potter's art. That is, the art of constructing vases. The archaeological, historical, and artistic importance of the vase is very great and may be compared with the numismatic art. In fact, the first object of which humanity felt the need was the vase, which came into being with the utilization of fire, and before the discovery of the production of fire. Indeed, the first food of mankind was cooked in a vase. One of the things most important ethically in judging the civilization of primitive people is the grade of perfection attained in pottery. In fact, the vase for domestic life and the axe for social life are the first sacred symbols which we find in the prehistoric epoch, and are religious symbols connected with the temples of the gods and with cult of the dead. Even today, religious cults have sacred vases in their sancta sanctorum. People who have progressed in civilization show their feeling for art and their aesthetic feeling also in vases, which are multiplied in almost infinite form, as we see in Egyptian, Etruscan, and Greek art. The vase then comes into being, attains perfection, and is multiplied in its uses and its forms. In the course of human civilization and the history of the vase follows the history of humanity itself. Besides the civil and moral importance of the vase, we have another and practical one, and its literal adaptability to every modification of form, and its susceptibility to the most diverse ornamentation. In this, it gives free scope to the individual genius of the artist. Thus, when once the handcraft leading to the construction of vases has been learned, and this is the part of the progress in the work learned from the direct and graduated instruction of the teacher, anyone can modify it according to the inspiration of his own aesthetic taste, and this is the artistic individual part of the work. Besides this, in Randon's school, the use of the potter's wheel is taught, and also the composition of the mixture for the bath of majolica ware, and baking the pieces in the furnace, stages of manual labor which contain an industrial culture. Another work in the School of the Educative Art is the manufacture of diminutive bricks and their baking in the furnace, and the construction of diminutive walls built by the same process which the masons use in the construction of houses, the bricks being joined by means of mortar handled with a trowel. After the simple construction of the wall, which is very amusing for the children who built it, placing brick on brick, superimposing row on row, the children pass to the construction of real houses, first resting on the ground and then really constructed with foundations after a previous excavation of large holes in the ground by means of little hoes and shovels. These little houses have openings corresponding to windows and doors and are variously ornamented in their facades by little tiles of bright and multicolored majolica, the tiles themselves being manufactured by the children. Thus, the children learn to appreciate the objects and constructions which surround them, with a real manual and artistic labor gives them profitable exercise. Such is the manual training which I have adopted in the children's house. After 2 or 3 lessons, the little pupils are already enthusiastic about the construction of vases, and they preserve very carefully their own products in which they take pride. With their plastic art, they then mold little objects, eggs or fruits, with which they themselves fill the vases. One of the first undertakings is the simple vase of red clay filled with eggs of white clay. Then comes the modeling of the vase with 1 or more spouts, of the narrow-mouthed vase, of the vase with the handle, and of that with 2 or 3 handles, of the tripod, of the amphora. For children of the age of 5 or 6, the work of the potter's wheel begins. But what most delights the children is the work of building a wall with little bricks and seeing a little house, and the fruits of their own hands rise in the vicinity of the ground in which are growing plants also cultivated by them. Thus the age of children epitomizes the principal primitive labors of humanity, when the human race, changing from the nomadic to the stable condition, demanded of the earth its fruit, built itself shelter, and devised vases to cook the foods yielded by the fertile earth. That concludes this chapter of the Montessori Method. Thank you for listening and for taking part in this journey with me. This project is very much an exploration. If you have thoughts to add, questions to ask, or if you think I misunderstood or missed something important, I genuinely want to hear from you. Please message me, share your reflections, or continue the conversation with fellow listeners. On a quest to learning, relearning, and engaging deeply with Dr. Montessori's work as we go. Join me next time as we continue chapter by chapter.